Olympic athletes competing at the tops of their games and assuming the risks that come with it.
We confirm the death of the Georgian luge athlete Nodar Komarishvili.
The Olympic Games promise triumph, unity, and moments that define human potential. But hidden beneath the spotlight is a history shaped by danger. Across decades, athletes and spectators stepped onto the world's grandest stage, expecting glory, only to meet catastrophe instead. Their stories reveal how quickly celebration can turn into crisis, how ambition can collide with fate, and how the pursuit of greatness sometimes demands unbearable cost. Tonight, we retrace 9 tragedies that reshaped Olympic history and forced the world to confront the peril behind the spectacle. Number 9. Ross Milne. In January 1964, Innsbruck rushed to prepare Olympic ski courses with minimal snow, thin protection, and dangerous blind sections carved through forested terrain. 19-year-old Ross Milne, Australia's brightest alpine hope, arrived focused, disciplined, and determined to prove his nation belonged on winter sport's biggest stage. But the downhill training run he faced was deeply flawed. No proper barriers, inconsistent surfaces, and spectators standing alarmingly close to the racing line. On his first official practice descent, Milne accelerated toward one of the course's steepest drops. As he crested the blind section, he suddenly saw people standing directly in front of him. Instinct forced him to swerve, but the maneuver sent him off balance and offline. Within seconds, he crashed headfirst into a tree with catastrophic force, losing consciousness instantly. He was airlifted to the hospital, but the damage was irreparable. Ross Milne died shortly after, becoming the second athlete killed before the games had even begun. Officials called it inexperience and issued no major course changes. But the tragedy exposed a devastating truth. When safety is compromised, even the most promising talent is left defenseless. Number 8. Kazimierz Kai Skrzypecki. 1 week before the 1964 Winter Games began, Innsbruck's luge track was already the subject of nervous whispers. The ice surface was inconsistent, sections were waterlogged, and athletes routinely crashed on curves that should have been manageable. Warnings circulated through the Olympic Village, but officials insisted the course was ready. Into this environment stepped 55-year-old Kazimierz Kai Skrzypecki, a former Royal Air Force pilot competing for Britain and the oldest athlete at the Games. Despite his age, he was in exceptional condition and beloved by younger competitors, who affectionately called him Uncle. During a practice run-in, his sled began to vibrate violently, a sign experienced lugers recognized as immediate danger. Before he could correct, the sled snapped off its line and launched out of the track entirely. He struck the frozen ground with catastrophic force. Rushed to the hospital, he was found to have severe skull and pelvic fractures. Against all odds, he survived the night, but his condition collapsed during emergency surgery the next morning. Kazimierz Kai Skrzypecki died before the Olympics officially opened. His death exposed the reality that the track's flaws, not age, were the true threat. Yet officials deflected blame, made no meaningful changes, and allowed competition to continue. His passing became an unspoken warning the Games chose not to hear. Number 7. Bahman Golbarnejad. Bahman Golbarnejad had already survived what should have killed him. As a young soldier during the Iran-Iraq War, he stepped on a landmine that tore away his left leg and nearly ended his life. Instead of surrendering to disability, he rebuilt himself through sport, rising from rehabilitation to national hero. He won multiple Paralympic weightlifting gold medals before reinventing himself a second time as a competitive cyclist. By the 2016 Rio Paralympics, he stood as Iran's sole representative in the C4 road cycling category, carrying not only his own hopes, but the pride of a nation that saw him as proof of unbreakable resilience. The Rio course, however, was brutally technical. Steep climbs, sharp descents, and high-speed turns that punished even the most seasoned riders. During the road race, Bahman lost control on a downhill section. His bike veered offline and slammed into a rock with violent force. He wore every piece of required safety gear, but the impact caused catastrophic head trauma. As medics rushed him toward the hospital, his condition worsened rapidly, and his heart stopped before he arrived. His son, already having lost his mother years earlier, was left orphaned. Flags at the Paralympics were lowered to half-mast, as the world mourned a man who had overcome war, injury, and adversity, only to be claimed by the unforgiving edge of competition. Number 6. Ignaz Stiefzohn. Ignaz Stiefzohn was one of aviation's early visionaries, a pilot who believed that silent, powerless gliders could harness invisible currents of air and rise with the grace of birds. His mastery earned him a place in the 1936 Berlin Olympics, where gliding was featured as a demonstration of human innovation. Steffone was chosen to lead Austria's team, a role that reflected both his skill and his reputation as a pioneer who understood the sky better than most. Days before the scheduled Olympic demonstration, he took his glider up for what should have been a routine training flight. Conditions were clear, winds stable, and nothing suggested danger. But mid-flight, the aircraft experienced a catastrophic structural failure. One of the wings fractured without warning, snapping under aerodynamic stress. Control vanished instantly. The glider twisted violently, turning smooth flight into a helpless fall. Steffone deployed his parachute, but he was only about 700 meters above the ground, far too low for the chute to slow his descent. Witnesses watched in horror as he struck the earth at lethal speed, the impact ending his life on the spot. His death underscored a harsh truth. Even outside competition, the Olympics have sometimes pushed athletes into environments where passion meets unforgiving physics. Number 5. Knud Enemark Jensen. Rome's 1960 Olympic cycling course was a furnace disguised as a racetrack. Temperatures soared above 104 degrees Fahrenheit, turning the 100-kilometer team trial into a brutal battle against heat as much as speed. Denmark entered as a strong contender, and 23-year-old Knud Enemark Jensen was one of the engines driving the team's hopes. Lean, resilient, and trained through harsh Scandinavian winters, Jensen understood suffering. Yet, nothing in his preparation matched the conditions awaiting him in Rome. From the start, the heat crushed lungs and blurred vision. Still, the Danish team maintained a relentless pace, riding in tight formation as the sun hammered the asphalt. Jensen began showing early signs of distress, unsteady lines, delayed reactions, but slowing down meant sacrificing the race. He pushed deeper into the danger zone, masking the body's warnings with sheer determination. Midway through the course, Jensen suddenly collapsed, crashing hard onto the scorching pavement. The impact fractured his skull, and the extreme heat had already pushed his body beyond recovery. He was rushed to a Roman hospital, but despite every effort, he died hours later. His death forced the Olympics to confront the risks of endurance competition under extreme conditions, prompting long overdue reforms in athlete safety and heat management. Number 4. Francisco Lázaro. On July 14, 1912, the Stockholm Olympic Marathon became a test of human limits rather than athletic glory. Temperatures soared toward 90 degrees Fahrenheit, water stations were scarce, and medical understanding of heat exhaustion was primitive. Into these brutal conditions stepped 21-year-old Francisco Lázaro, Portugal's first Olympic marathon runner, a young athlete carrying the pride of a nation, still carving its identity on the world stage. Determined to protect himself from the harsh sun, Lázaro made a tragic miscalculation before the race. He coated his entire body in wax or oil, believing it would prevent sunburn. Instead, the layer trapped heat, blocking his ability to sweat and cool down. As the marathon wound through dusty rural roads, runners dropped out one by one. But Lázaro pushed on, his body temperature climbing dangerously with every mile. Spectators later recalled his unsteady gait and distant expression, but medical teams weren't stationed along the course. There was no one to intervene. Near the 19-mile mark, his body finally gave out, and he collapsed on the roadside with an estimated core temperature of 106 degrees Fahrenheit. Rushed to a Stockholm hospital, he never regained consciousness. Francisco Lázaro died the next morning, becoming the first athlete to lose his life directly from Olympic competition. His tragedy forced the Games to adopt hydration access, medical supervision, and heat safety protocols, standards written in the shadow of his final steps. Number 3. Alice Hawthorne. On July 27, 1996, Centennial Olympic Park in Atlanta was meant to embody everything joyful about the Games. Music filled the night air, crowds celebrated freely, and families gathered under the summer sky without fear. Among them was 44-year-old Alice Hawthorne, who had saved for months to bring her teenage daughter to experience the Olympics firsthand. For them, this was a dream trip, history, celebration, and a rare moment shared just between mother and child. Unseen in the festive crowd, a backpack lay tucked beside a sound tower. Inside were pipe bombs placed by a domestic terrorist. A security guard noticed the suspicious bag and began clearing people away, but time was already running out. At 1:20 a.m., the bomb exploded, sending shrapnel slicing through the packed audience. The blast turned music into screams as chaos erupted across the park. Alice was struck by flying metal fragments and collapsed as her daughter cried for help amid smoke, panic, and confusion. Emergency teams arrived quickly, but the injuries were fatal. More than 100 others were hurt in the blast and the frantic stampede that followed. Alice Hawthorne became the only person killed directly by the bombing, a tragedy that ended the era of relaxed Olympic security and forced the Games to confront the reality of modern violence. Number 2. Nodar Kumaritashvili. On February 12, 2010, the Whistler Sliding Center loomed like a steel and ice monster. Its curves were steep, its speeds extreme, and even elite lugers whispered concerns after multiple violent practice crashes. For 21-year-old Nodar Kumaritashvili, competing for Georgia in his first Olympics, the track represented both a dream and an unforgiving test. He carried the pride of his country, the legacy of his father, a former luger, and the hopes of a team with limited resources but boundless determination. When Nodar launched from the start, he tucked into the razor-thin aerodynamic position that defines luge, his sled accelerating relentlessly as it carved through the course. Officials watched anxiously as he entered the final section, notorious for pushing athletes toward nearly 95 miles per hour. A minor steering error became catastrophic at such speed. His sled lifted off the ice, throwing him over the protective wall and into an unpadded steel pillar. The impact was fatal. Medical teams responded instantly, but the force left no chance of survival. Just hours before the Olympic opening ceremony, the world was confronted with a tragedy that shook the Games to their core. The track was altered immediately. Lowered start positions, added padding, but the cost had already been paid. Nodar's death became a somber symbol of how razor-thin the line is between Olympic glory and unimaginable loss. Number 1. Nicolas Bouchate. February 22, 1992. High in the French Alps at Les Arcs, speed skiing, one of the most extreme sports ever allowed near the Olympic stage, was preparing for its final appearance. Competitors hurled themselves downhill at speeds exceeding 120 miles per hour, faster than most cars on a highway, with only aerodynamic suits and razor-sharp instincts separating them from catastrophe. Among them was 27-year-old Swiss skier Nicolas Bouchate, an elite athlete who had trained his entire life for this moment. Even as a demonstration event, this was likely his only chance to prove himself before the world. That morning's conditions were perfect for speed, and perfect for danger. Visibility was clear, the snow was fast, and every athlete knew they would reach lethal velocity within seconds. During a warm-up run on a slope beside the official course, Nicolas launched over a small bump, a routine motion for someone accustomed to flying inches above ice. But as he landed, fate intervened. A snow grooming machine sat directly in his path, massive, slow, and impossible to avoid at over 100 miles per hour. Its lights flashed, its siren sounded, but he had no time, no distance, and no chance. The impact was instantaneous and fatal. Shock rippled through the athletes and officials, and several competitors withdrew in grief. By the end of the Games, the verdict was clear. Speed skiing had no future at the Olympics. Nicolas Bouchate's final run became the moment that the sport crossed the line from risk into unacceptable danger. If these stories moved you, hit like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. Your support helps us uncover more hidden histories and bring powerful, untold stories to light. Stay with us for the next deep dive into the world's most extraordinary events.